The birthplace of hip hop will soon be in the world and be in the Bronx, which will be the world's first museum celebrating the genre. Hip hop royalty converged on a large tract of empty land in the South Bronx, overlooking the Harlem River for the ceremonial groundbreaking of the Universal Hip Hop Museum. The event drew who's who of the legendary hip hop artists, including Grandmaster Flash, Slick Rick, Chuck D, Nas, LL Cool J, and Fat Joe. City and state officials joined the hip hop luminaries to plant the shovels on the ground for the $80 million, 52,000 square foot museum financed through the city and state and private monies.
And with that, the most culturally relevant genre of music now on its way to getting its due. The titans of hip-hop converged in the Bronx to break ground on the much-anticipated Universal Hip Hop Museum.
It means everything. It's hip-hop. It started here. This is the mecca, the birthplace.
From Fat Joe repping Trinity Ave to LL Cool J doing it well and Nasty Nas, New York's biggest imports celebrated the culture and what will be its new home along the Harlem River waterfront.
Hip hop is one of those things that really, gave my life meaning. You know what I'm saying? It made me feel like I could really do something with my life.
The storytelling is beyond Shakespearean with Slick Rick, and it taught me more than schools taught me, believe it or not.
What all started as an idea nearly 10 years ago is closer than ever to becoming reality thanks to Hip Hop Museum co-founder Rocky Bucano.
So we're here to talk about this topic, and we're joining us our brother Dr. Gary Clark, who's a monthly contributor, and we have who's standing in for our sister attorney Sadia Kareem is our brother Dr. Brian Turner. Thank you all, brothers, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So let's get straight to it, and I'll start off with you, Dr. Clark. So do you believe that such a museum is even needed?
Well, Brother Willie, thank you for having me on your program again. It's always an honor. And let me just say this. This provides continuity, the museum. And it's continuity, and is it needed? Absolutely, because it provides the kind of linkages that should exist between not just generational, but it should exist because this is a unique form of music. And it's not only is a unique form of music, born in America, Sobro, South Bronx, in the Bronx. And what it does is that it gives Americans and the world, it gives them a linkage that is important. And it's a linkage that works with generations as well, because music tells a story. I can think, and I'm going to say very quickly, I'm not of the hip hop generation, but I did love the music. But I can recall from my generation with R&B and all that sort of thing, and how it was museums were needed because it tells a story. A story of a people, and in this particular case, the story of individuals who are in the early part of the 20th century, minorities in majority culture, but in the 21st century, a group that's going to be part of the majority culture in our society. And so, I think it's needed, absolutely, 100%.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Clark. And Dr. Turner, what do you think? What do you see as the significance of this soon to be erected museum?
I think the beauty of any museum is that we get to tell the story of people as they experience life, especially for African Americans in inner city, as we understand hip hop being born in the Bronx, but taking over the country. And now you can't turn on the TV show. You can't watch a commercial. You can't go into a store and buy an item or be a consumer without hip hop in some way, shape, or form being a part of that experience. So I think the Hip Hop Museum will definitely go into a point of reference for individuals who want to know more. But I think specifically, it even gives us an anchor institution in terms of the African American experience in the 20th century, post the civil rights movement, post slavery, where we begin to actually tell our own stories. And if we think about historically, that was one of the things that was lost through slavery, that we stopped telling our own stories. So I'm very, very excited about this opportunity, just like with any museum, whether it be the National African American Museum in DC. Anytime Black people get to tell their own story, I'm for it.
Thank you. Going back to you, Dr. Clark, recent studies revealed that hip hop is the most popular and influential musical genre over the last decades, even surpassing rock and roll. But what's interesting, why do you think that a musical art form that was once considered to be a fad, that people didn't even think will continue to this time, has now become the most popular and most influential genre in over the last 5 decades.
Well, as Professor Turner indicated, and I agree with him on 100%, he's thoroughly on point, and that is the fact that it tells a story. But it doesn't just, it tells a story. Yes, indeed, that to some extent is unique to the Black American experience. But guess what? It also tells a story. Hip hop tells a story because there's even within the genre of hip hop, there are all sorts of other stories which are being told. And I can hip hop, blues, these other arenas, you can go to many of these artists to their concerts. B.B. King, talk about his concert. You go to his concert, 70% white, Anglo-Saxon. You go to many of these hip hop artists, you go to their concerts, 70% white. It's amazing. And so, no, the story that they tell, that is being told through this music, is one that permeates society. And I think for all intents and purposes, we know it's necessary, we know it's needed, but it's a true story. And sometimes when it's true and it's relevant, yes, it's transcended the generations, and it's going to be here when you and I are dust. And that's the way it is.
Thank you. And Dr. Turner, what's your take? How is it that a musical form that was considered to be a fad and people say would not even exist, now you can hear a rap song, a part of a cereal commercial or anything? What are your thoughts?
Well, we know the homeboy Master P is taking over the world. So if you just look at Master P and all that he's done, it shows you that the reality of it is really something that I think is even deeper. Black people have really been the lifeline and the bloodline of this country. So when we think about the Hip Hop Museum and the fact that, as Dr. Clark alluded to, it's not just telling the story of Black America, it's telling the story of America. So when we talk about fads, and then when you go back to jazz and blues and gospel music, right? Those are all things that came out of the Black experience, the African-American experience in America. So we can say it's a fad. People can label it as that, and an attempt to diminish or to demean the actual intellectual property of such. But if we think about it, the stories that Slick Rick told, the stories that Public Enemy told, the stories of Nas, the story of Das Effects, Tribe Called Quest, if we really listen to the words that those brothers spoke, and then I can't forget my sisters in the game too. So MC Light, Queen Latifah, when we play with our homegirl Mia X, like the stories that they told are so real to the American experience. I know I'm not gonna let die because I still listen to it.
Hey, absolutely. Hey, let me add, MC Light is on the board at my university, the board of trustees at University. And and interesting enough, our president, Dr. Walter Kimbrough, his handle for a long time was the hip hop president.
That's right.
And Mia X recently taught a class at Tulane. So once again, we understand that. We look at the fact that Lil Wayne, he's not unintelligent. We look at Cortez Bryant, another homeboy from New Orleans, got degrees and they're moving the game forward. You think about Master P, got a degree. So once again, we can't ignore or diminish the intellectual properties that are built into the music and the genre and what it actually does. And we go back to the African griots and telling the story is just the way that they told the story for the people to understand. So hip hop was just what? The way we told our stories. So look, it's going to be here. I'm loving it. I can't wait to go visit.
Good. Go
Let me
ahead,
add, Dr. Turner sounds like an MC. He's spinning these names. Yes,
that is. And so, when we talk about hip hop, there's often this discussion of whether or not that some people inside the Black community and even outside the Black community at various levels, some feel that hip hop is detrimental. So from each of your perspectives, we'll start with Dr. Turner, then we'll come back to you, Dr. Clark. Has hip hop been more beneficial or detrimental to the Black community?
Overall, I'm gonna say it's been more beneficial. I think just like with anything, people and let's call it what it is. We know that there's certain portions of America that will pervert anything for their own gain. So once again, when we see the fingers of the industry leaders and the moguls, when they take over independent labels and when they get their fingers, and we understand everything that has gone down with contracts and artists having control of their own images and music, that will pervert it. And that's why if I can for a minute, a dope documentary that I still use in my class, Hip Hop Beyond Beats and Rhymes by the documentarian Byron Hurt, I think that tells a great story of why hip hop can take that unceremonious and unsanctimonious turn towards the more detrimental, because that's what industry execs tell us. Like even when we look at the fact that the same year that Snoop Dogg and NWA came out with Gin and Juice, Public Enemy was actually one of the highest grossing groups and artists. So I have to say it's more beneficial, but I have to say to my people, we have to choose what we listen to, and we choose with either our feet or with our dollars. So I'm always choose the hip hop and the rap and the music that's going to uplift the community. So I'm going with beneficial.
And Dr. Clark, briefly before we go to our next break, what is your take on that? Is it more beneficial or has it been more detrimental?
Of course, it's more beneficial. However, like all things, there are certain aspects of it which have been corrupted. And the message itself has been corrupted. And you being a person of faith understands as well that we all have to be careful about what we consume and what we digest. But in the short and long term, it's hip hop has added and has great value. There are those who would say that, hey, singing those gospel songs, some of those gospel songs, is detrimental to America, to society. Why you sing Strange Fruit? You don't want to hear that sort of jazz. Oh no, that is bad. And so, we got to be careful in terms when it comes to the question of detrimental. I would say 100% that in the long term, it's been wholly beneficial. And the museum is going to tell the story, good and bad. And I have faith in those who are putting it together that the true story of hip hop is going to be told, and the evolution of it, because it's not dead.
That's what Nas said. Nas had to say is hip hop dead. So thank you all for your comments, your commentary on that. We're going to go to our first break and we'll pause from some announcements from our sponsors. But when we return, we're going to talk about the Juneteenth becoming a national holiday, whether it is a true sign of progress or just symbolism. We'll be back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.
Worldwide, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Download the Final Call Radio app and take us everywhere. On your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also log on to finalcall.com and click the Listen Live button or finalcallradio.com. Final Call Radio, the official voice of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam.
Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel at National Network View. I am Anissa Muhammad with nnvnews.com.
President Joe Biden signed a recent legislation to make Juneteenth a historically black Southern tradition into a federal holiday, enshrining June 19 as the national day to commemorate the news of slavery's ending being reached to American slaves in Texas and other states in the Southwest.
President Biden signed into law a federal holiday for an event that many Americans had never even heard of until a few years ago.
This is a day of profound, in my view, profound weight and profound power.
Freedom Day for American slaves, Juneteenth. And it was almost 156 years ago to the day when federal troops moved into Galveston, Texas, setting free the last remaining slaves in America who had no idea that they had been freed years before.
We are gathered here in a house built by enslaved people. We are footsteps away from where President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
The first black vice president was holding the hand of the 94-year-old black woman who helped make this happen, Miss Opal Lee.
So we're back with our commentators, Brother Dr. Gary Clark and Brother Dr. Brian Turner. So let's get straight to it. And here's something I'll start off with. The popularity of Juneteenth seemed to dramatically increase from my perspective over these last 3 years. Have you all noticed the same? If so, why do you think it has become so big? And we'll start with you, Dr. Turner, then we'll go to Dr. Clark.
Hold on. Well, be quiet. I'm sorry, little baby interrupt. I just checking on you, okay? I gotta finish. Go back. All right. So, life of fatherhood, man.
That's
I love it.
We got it.
So in my reality, I think Juneteenth's greatest contribution right now has been that we're bringing true recognition to the experience of the complete freeing of enslaved people in America. And I think it's something that's actually should be noted that we can use to bring our community tighter in an effort to supersede some of the negative things that have had to bring us together over the last couple of years. So I take Juneteenth as a very powerful experience. And when I was in Pensacola, Florida, and in Akron, Ohio, we did Juneteenth celebrations that were very muted and were not always acceptable or palatable to the masses. I see this as an opportunity to really take our time and really develop an experience and a celebration that can bring truth to light. And as we saw earlier with the comments about critical race theory, to heck with critical race theory, this is the thing we need. This will actually give us the power to have the conversation.
What do you say, Dr. Clark? Have you noticed, like, there's just been, not to say that Juneteenth is not important, but it just seems like it has taken on a greater significance nationally? And if so, why?
Well, it's taken on the greatest significance because it is indeed important, and it's now on it's now part of it's on the national menu and part of the national discussion. It's needed and necessary. It was stated by some recent academics who said, "Wait a minute, part of the narrative that we hear about Juneteenth is not as true as you may think." That many of those who were enslaved during that period in Texas actually knew that they were free, but they were held captive. And were not allowed to be free. And so when the general came in to let them know, the general came with guns to tell them that you need to free these people and you need to enforce the law of the land. But getting back to your statement in terms of where we are and what the impact of Juneteenth is highly important because symbolism has value in American society. We recognize the nature of symbolism. But you know what is very, very important about this? And that is, from a political perspective, this is in American society, we operate in terms of incrementalism. And in terms of the incrementalism, this is the next stage as we move forward toward reparations. Before you can move to reparations as a whole, the argument is given, well, the part of the presentation, should I say, is that, wait a minute, first we need to recognize that there's been an injustice.
Yes, sir.
So as you move toward that, you're preparing the society for reparations, and reparations will come in some form or fashion. That's an absolute.
Wow, beautiful. So, what's interesting, we're going to come back to that about reparations as well, because I want to talk about that. But Dr. Turner, you mentioned about critical race theory, and it's interesting that this holiday was made a national holiday in the midst of still delayed progress on protecting voting rights, police reform, the debate over critical race theory, and even the commission to study the impacts of slavery. So how does that America look with that you can make this a national holiday, but these other issues that still affect Black people are still being delayed?
Well, I don't know about Dr. Clark, but in my classroom, I don't actually title anything critical race theory. I call it the truth. I call it facts. I call it what really happened. So for me, the ability to explore Juneteenth and the various incidences in America of oppression and depression and genocide and homicide against Black and brown people and trans and other folks in this country who've been ostracized, left out, stepped on, knocked out, knocked back, knocked down. My reality is I don't need to call it critical race theory. I just call it the truth. And so for me, and I like the way Dr. Clark put it in terms of the incrementalism of America, in that nothing moves quickly in this country. So until we take some of these small steps forward, we can't begin to build the evidentiary process to actually move towards reparations or true change. So we have to think in terms of how do we build the evidence? How do we put together the story so that we can actually move towards it? So I think, once again, we as Black and brown people in America, we've been able to chew gum and walk. So it's not that we can only do one thing. So I like the question of symbol or substance, but oftentimes it's the symbol. That's why Batman is so important because that symbol goes up. If you remember the movie, they was just Commissioner Gard would just put the symbol up in the sky, and criminals would just go in. So we have to have some of that symbol while sometimes we're still working on the substance. So for me, I think the reality of this is one of those stakes in the ground, one of those landmark movements that we can actually tell our kids, tell our people, and bring us together without feeling like we have to operate in the backwoods or behind the scenes, and we can talk about what actually happened, and then we can come with the policies and practice to make this happen.
Wow. So, Dr. Clark, you mentioned about how this could be used in this ongoing effort to get reparations in some form. So can you elaborate more on how this being made into a national holiday can be used to add to the fuel to get reparations in America for Black people?
Well, there is something, that one would call linkage. And, in political science, you have linkage. And in this particular case, all of these elements are linked together. And why so? Because it's necessary. When we talk about HBCUs funding, when we talk about immigration, when we talk about civil rights, all of these things which are important to African Americans and people of color, Black and brown people of color, guess what? If you want the kind of influence in American society, it's going to be acquired. What we're doing today, I think, is highly important. What we're doing here, when you have your public intellectuals participating, we have your politicals who are participating. It's a war out there, and so you have to have every element of society working together to provide the kind of support that's necessary to move the race. And that is what becomes important. And I'll say this very, very quickly. I'm a graduate of Howard University. When I was there in the 70s, they taught us that the truth, as Professor Turner indicated. It said you must teach. And when I went to my first teaching position was at Spelman College, and my uncle said to me, well, nephew, are you teaching them the truth? And I said, and I had to go back and look and say, yes, I have to go back and revise my syllabus because you must teach the truth, as Howard University taught us to do. And so even in the 70s, even that was given the critical race theory, but you didn't go around saying it's critical race theory. You started from the premise of how the society is developed and how it works. And then from there you move forward. So in our classrooms, this is something which is unique to the, I think, to the HBCU community. And what we do here is that we make sure that we teach our students the truth, so they don't go out there with a false understanding of the nature of society. And that's the way it works.
Good. And so here's a question that I'll talk to you, Dr. Turner. We know we had President Obama for 2 administrations. Like, how come, if you know anything about it, like, why wasn't this made into a national holiday under his administration? Was it because of the percentages of the 2 houses, or what?
I think from a political standpoint, I'll defer to Dr. Clark if he wants to take that. But what I would say from a psychological standpoint, I think if we remember when President Obama took office, he was dealt a pretty heavy hand in terms of the economic situation in our country and dealing with the ongoing wars. Plus, I think in a very good way, he took on the healthcare issue. And if we remember, he was told pretty handily by the same Mitch McConnell that he wanted healthcare to be his Waterloo, and he would do everything he could to stop him. Now, I would have loved for President Obama to take on a lot more issues centered around the African-American issues in our country. But we also have to understand that, as Dr. Clark just said, this is a battle. This is a war. And we have to take these victories. And so I think this is a victory in the battle, in the larger war against racism, white supremacy, and white privilege in this country. And I don't want to diminish the legacy of President Obama, because I do have a lot of concerns about things he did, but I think it just came down to what was at hand, what could he do, and what else could happen. And so, and I would say on the flip of that, because it fed into some of the work I did, I think his initiatives on HBCUs, on working with Black men in America, I think those are some things that he was working on that were just as important. But I do agree that it would have been great to have the Black president, pin the Black holiday. So, but I do understand that's a good question. But I think, at the time there was a number of other things going on that maybe superseded the ability for him to get to this because of the issues politically in the House and in the Senate.
Okay, so Doc, we'll come to our political expert, our brother who's a political science professor. So, Dr. Clark, why didn't this victory take place under our brother, President Barack Obama?
Well, from a political perspective, the president he was busy trying to save America. Because, as they used to always, I've had folks say, they give us the keys, they give us the job once to do all the heavy lifting. And so he came in when America was trying to stay afloat. But not to give him a pass, but let's be perfectly honest when it comes to the politics of this. Martin Luther King holiday came under Republican administration. You see, so many advances which was signed came under Republican administration because they wanted to get the credit, and they held off until they got the credit. Well, you know what? This president said we're not going to wait for someone else to get the credit. We're doing it right now. And when it's all said and done, many states already recognized the date. And so it was more of a lateral move to some extent for the federal government to do this. We find the symbolism highly important. We think it's great, but it was a lateral move, and it's one that it was 100% did not meet any true opposition
exactly.
from the opposition, because for them there are issues as they see it which are bigger than a holiday, which the ones that we know which are bigger than a holiday, like the rights of Black people to walk free and not molested and disturbed in American society.
So let's a little bit more into that before we go into the break. So do you think that it didn't face a lot of opposition because they just knew those who would normally oppose such, well, it's just a holiday, we can give them a holiday, but if they're coming with this police reform bill, we're going to fight for this voting rights thing, we're going to fight for this. What do you say, Dr. Turner?
I think that's exactly the point, that what we're seeing in America is, what I like to think about is one of the last bastions of white supremacy being held. That I think in many ways, because of the continual browning and the continual multiculturalism that's growing in America, you have a cadre of people that stormed the Capitol, not because it was politically astute or was going to change anything, but because they thought because they were white, they could do that and get away with it. And I think where we stand right now is that we are going to have to continue to do just like Sister Stacey Abrams did in Georgia. We have to continue to move the community. That's why I think the symbolism and the substance of a holiday like Juneteenth is so important, because it continues to grow the understanding of what our communities have to contend with. When we see new candidates for office who are going to push the envelope, who are going to bring up these issues and going to make sure that we have these conversations, I'm all for it, because at the end of the day, people are not going to give up what they feel they're entitled to. And it's going to take sometimes for us to take pretty ardent stances against this and have to fight for it. And so I think this is a great opportunity to say, just like Dr. Clark said, that we give the victory where it is, but we also understand that there's much more that we're fighting for. And we take this victory as an opportunity to continue to grow towards those ends.
Yes, sir. And as we get ready to go to our next break, I'll close with you on this, Dr. Clark. Does this action by President Biden show his administration's commitment to the concerns of his Black constituents? Well, demography matters, and it shows his concerns. Yes, but let me tell you something else. As we move closer, further away into the in the 21st century, and as we see the browning of America, guess what? You're gonna find a national holiday named for Latino American. I guarantee you. And you're going to find a national holiday named for an Asian American. I guarantee you. It's part of the process as the evolution and development of this nation state, of this country. We call Blacks who act like whites, who assimilate too much. We call them, there was a time in my generation, they used to call them Oreos. Well, guess what? The Asians have something, have a name they call Twinkies. They say yellow on the outside, white on the inside. And so much of what we go through in our society, we know, even though we know it's distinctively different in terms of how we came to America, but there are many of the same vices and ills which are being fought by other individuals who are minority communities in our society, in the state. Yes, sir. Thank you. So let's pause for the announcements from our sponsors. And when we return, our contributors will share their thoughts on why applications and enrollments are spiking at historically Black colleges. We'll be right back.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Your support helps to combat false media. Cash App NNV News.
Asiatic Minds, online education. helping our children to discover their God-given skills, gifts, talents, and passion that will allow them to see their greatness as well as the greatness of our people. And upon discovering that greatness, infusing them with the desire to use it for the betterment of themselves, their families, our people, and the world. Classes begin September 1st. To enroll, visit AsiaticMinds.com.
This is Sister Sajda Muhammad. We are proud to announce that the Sajda House commemorative Elijah coins are finally here. This priceless heirloom, made from recycled copper from the messenger's home, is now available at sajdahouse.com.
Greetings from National Network View. This week's Final Call cover story headline is dedicated to a good man and his good works. Longtime Chicago pastor and activist Father Michael Pfleger has worked tirelessly on behalf of poor and disenfranchised residents for decades in the face of opposition and trials. He continues to fearlessly fight and press ahead for the most vulnerable communities. This FCN volume number 37 edition middle page article is a message by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan entitled, "We Must Depend on Allah and Ourselves." To read more, subscribe to finalcalldigital.com and tune in to the all-new Final Call Radio. This is the nnvnews.com Final Call cover report.
Please make sure you leave your comments and questions in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook, National Network View, and make sure to check us out on Twitter as well, National Network View. This is Sergio Gutierrez with National Network View, signing off.
While enrollment at traditional universities is seeing a decline, on the opposite end, enrollment has spiked at a lot of historically Black colleges and universities across the country.
It's the time when high school graduates make that consequential decision. What's next?
You did it! I know! You made it!
Curtis Lawrence has made his choice.
I decided to go with FAMU.
Behind those braces and that megawatt smile is a gifted 16-year-old who's about to be a high school graduate. How'd you get so smart?
Well, it's really a product of my parents. They started me out early and made sure that I had the tools I needed to succeed.
Reading by 2, kindergarten at 4, skipping grades by 7. Curtis practices capoeira, Afro-Brazilian martial arts, plays piano, even speaks fluent Mandarin.
你好，我会去大学读生物学. Hi, I'll be going to college to study biology.
Curtis was offered $1.6 million in scholarships and accepted into 14 schools, including Harvard and Yale. But his pick, Florida A&M University.
So we're back and we're here. It's good that we're having this discussion because we have two professors, one from Dillard University and the other from Xavier University. So I'll start with you, Dr. Turner. When we're talking about this, what do you attribute the increase in enrollment at HBCUs to?
So I'm going to give credit to someone who I rarely, if ever, would give credit to, the Donald J. Trump.
I figured that.
But I only give him that credit because I think he's helped to awaken an understanding amongst our community that we actually have to support our own entities, right? And I say that in the grand scheme of things that for so long, and I remember my own grandmother explaining to me how growing up, she was told that white ice was colder. And in my mind, as a graduate of Isidore Newman High School, where I understood that ice freezes at the same temperature, no matter who puts it in the freezer, it baffled me that this could be told to people and they would either believe it or accept it. And so I think we found ourselves in a very precarious but also profitable moment as HBCUs that we can come to understand that it is so important for us to provide a learning environment, but also a social and cultural experience that our young people will actually really appreciate, kind of like when we was growing up, when we watched The Different World. So to me, I'll give credit to Donald Trump for once again pulling back the cover on the fact that white ice ain't colder.
Good. And what do you say, Dr. Clark? I know because you were at Dillard University. What do you attribute the increase to?
Yeah, and Dr. Turner is on point again as well in terms of the Trump factor, because the Trump factor indeed has great value in terms of motivating these young people of color in terms of the colleges that they choose and also other platforms. But there's some academics that say, you know what? A part of what's driving the enrollment up is the fact of the hate crimes that you see on the PWIs, on those campuses. The hate crimes that exist and the way they're treated in the classrooms. And there are those who cannot withstand the treatment and do not want to be part of the hate crime or hearing about the hate crime that exists. And that becomes relevant to them. But then, you know what? It goes beyond hate crimes as well, because in many cases, you cannot choose something that you know very little about. And many folks, let's say, who live on the West Coast, in California, there are those who say, you know what, they don't have exposure to the HBCUs. But then they hear about it from their grandparents and their parents and other wells, and then they get this sort of exposure. And there are even scholarships which are being made available for folks in California to go to an HBCU. And that's the beauty of this process. And so, yes, I would say certain things, and I think that Dr. Turner could recognize this as well, that, for instance, over at Howard University, is given that with Kamala Harris, political science students now is the most popular major on campus because of her. When you see something, when you see that exposure, and you see individuals you know that you go to work with, your parents go to work with, and you see them being successful in the community with a different kind of perspective, then it gives you the certain kind of gravitas to say, you know what, I want to go to an institution such as that. So HBCUs, they're discovering, have something to offer. And let me say, in the final analysis, I get upset with candidates who run for office who say, oh, there's apathy, they don't vote. Well, no, you have to have something to offer them to make them want to come out and vote. Same thing with our institutions. Have something to offer. Over there at Xavier, they have a great platform, a wonderful institution, a menu of things for students to take. Same thing at my university, at Dillard University. And so when you have things to offer, then they will choose it and be happy about the selection.
Wow. And now, since we're talking about the increase in enrollment, so that means also more than likely the increase in graduates. So Dr. Turner, how do you think this spike will benefit the Black community in the future?
Well, I really want to say, Dr. Clark, segue into the understanding that HBCUs offer a huge platform of learning and potential career opportunities is really the point that really this all rests on. For so long, we were told that HBCUs are subpar. As a graduate of Southern University in Baton Rouge and Jackson State University, for so long it was said and told that, oh, if you go to those schools, you won't make it. I've even had students ask me, do I feel my degrees, both coming from HBCUs, is that some type of a hindrance? And I simply asked that student, do you feel any of my white colleagues who did not attend any HBCUs or any universities of any diversity beyond being a predominantly white institute, do you think they are limited in terms of their ability to see the issue? And they said, I never thought about it that way. So as Dr. Clark put it, I think the reality of it is HBCUs are once again being rediscovered as the true pantheon of Black excellence and intelligence that they always been. And what we're seeing, because I remember when I was at Southern and Jackson State, the students flocked from Chicago and California and the Midwest and the Northeast, because they understood that there was something about that soil down south at the HBCUs that they just couldn't get anywhere. So I think once again, we're seeing a revitalization of the Black intelligence that's going to carry us into the next century and beyond. And I think it's just a rediscovery of something that's always been there, and it's just been toiling. And so when you have people like the hip hop prez, and we have people like Dr. Norman C. Francis and Brother Wahab as a graduate of the Xavier University itself, we understand that there's excellence that's always been at these institutions. We just have to find a replenishing in the next generation. So I think, once again, that's why I'm at Xavier. Tell Dr. Red I don't see myself leaving, so we could make that happen.
And Dr. Clark, do you touched on it, I want you to touch on it some more. From your perspective, do the HBCUs, are they a better fit for students of color in comparison to the PWIs?
Well, I look at it this way. You may have 3 kids. One should go to a PWI, one should go to an HBCU, and one should go to work and make the money. I mean, that's just the way it is. You have to find it's an individual. I know whole families that say all my kids are going to go to an HBCU, and that's great and that's fine. But you've got to look at your kids and see which is a greater fit for them. And once you find what is the greater fit for them and the best fit for them, then that's the way it works. And when they find a place that they like, it's like a marriage, and it's going to last for a lifetime, and they're going to be happy about it. If my experience is that I find that the HBCU narrative is superior. Students who come out of this, I know students who graduate from certain universities. You can't shake a Hampton graduate. You can't shake a Spelman graduate. You can't shake a Xavier graduate. And even at my institution, they become 100% loyal to those institutions. And when you talk about Southern University in Baton Rouge and Jackson State in these schools, what make those universities, believe it or not, it's not the students and not the presidents or administrations. Administrations come and go. Students come and go, but the faculties at those institutions is what make them great. And so that's the greatness of HBCUs, the faculty, when it's all said and done.
Wow. Dr. Turner, what are your thoughts on that?
I can only say ashe, and in so many ways give credence to what the brother Dr. Clark has said. I think the reality of it is once again, HBCUs have been doing this work. In my trip to Ghana, I feel like I got to see the original HBCUs. Wow. and an understanding that those are the institutions that go all the way back to ancient Timbuktu, and the reality of knowledge coming from the motherland, and just understanding that when we're able to be in these spaces, unfeathered, untapered, right? That's when we really flourish. So the reality for me is, as Dr. Clark said it, it's fine if a student wants to attend a predominantly white institution or other institution, because as we see, so many scholars of color have been able to go to the Harvards and Yales and the MITs and the Stanfords. That's great. But the other reality is that there's a number of students who need that nurturing and need that opportunity. And the big psychological part for me is they need that connection about who they are and that identity piece. And that's what I think is so central to the HBCU experience, that actually makes those students into those professionals, into those policymakers, and into those change makers, and into those historians and history makers, as Dr. Clark alludes to. It's that identity piece, and that's what I hang my hat on.
Wow, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for both of you all for your commentary on these topics. And so we appreciate your time, and also we appreciate your scholarship and your insight. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you. Thank you, Dr. Clark. Thank you, Brother Muhammad.
Thank you all for joining us and tuning in to National Network View. Please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. Follow us on social media at NNV News, and please subscribe to our YouTube channel, NNV News, as well. This is Willie Muhammad with National Network View. Good night.
Be a part of the force that powers truth in journalism. Go to nnvnews.com/donate.